Please.
Commitment to advance social justice. 30 years into democracy, many South Africans are still not free. Not free from hunger, not free from poverty.
Sina,
Not
please
free
make your
from
way up to the
structural
top.
inequality and systemic
Santa's here.
injustices that continue to hold them
Patrol
back.
is online.
The Musa Plan for Social Justice is an integrated catalytic plan of action aimed at accelerating the advancement of social justice by breaking the chains of poverty and inequality by 2030. It is a commitment to ensure that no one remains trapped in the circumstances of their birth. For too long, we failed to translate many of the promises we made to ourselves in the Constitution into reality. The Musa Plan seeks to change that. The multi-pronged approach involving policy reform, social accountability, resource mobilization, building state capacity, and strengthen democratic leadership. We need all hands on deck. The Musa Plan is about leveraging data, ensuring that policies are not one size fits all, but tailored to the needs of all, including poor people, women, people with disabilities, children, and rural communities. If we don't deal with poverty and inequality now, it will only get worse. And that poses a real threat to our democracy, the economy, and peace. The plan also focuses on building bridges between communities, healing divisions of the past. It's about creating real opportunities for social mobility for all while ensuring that the future is different from the past. We need you. Join hands with us to make this vision a reality. Together, we can accelerate the fight against poverty and inequality. Join us in the Musa Plan for Social Justice. Together, we will change the trajectory of this nation. Despite a clear constitutional commitment to advance social justice, 30 years into democracy, many South Africans are still not free. Not free from hunger, not free from poverty, not free from structural inequality and systemic injustices that continue to hold them back. The Musa Plan for Social Justice is an integrated catalytic plan of action aimed at accelerating the advancement of social justice by breaking the chains of poverty and inequality by 2030. It is a commitment to ensure that no one remains trapped in the circumstances of their birth. For too long, we failed to translate many of the promises we made to ourselves in the Constitution into reality. The Musa Plan seeks to change that.
Now that the coffee break is done,
approach
the group photo is done, the media interview has been concluded. We are now commencing with session 2, and that's the keynote plenary on advancing a social justice perspective on the right to food at a national and global imperative. Sina, Luncheon, please come to the front. Ms. Janet Rebecca Hunter is here. Judge Sulet Potterall will be joining virtually, and I'm sure the technical team is on top of that. Dr. Henk Boshoff, please come through to the front and on stage and assume a seat somewhere. Ms. Karina Miller, please do the same. Mr. Johan Kotza, please come to the front. Mr. Neil Coleman, please come to the front. Professor Nico Olivier, doen asseblief ook dieselfde. Kom vorentoe. Baie dankie.
and then it will be live on my side because it's not live yet. Yeah, I hit the mute, but on the date, button up and then the mic will be live.
Thank you for honoring time to those who are back. Professor Madonsela is here. The panelists are here. If I may just quickly go through the list of panelists who will be part of now the second session that I'll be moderating. Sina Lushen, Regional Emergency and Resilience Agronomist, Food and Agriculture Organization at the United Nations. Welcome, sir. Thank you very much. Ms. Janet Rebecca Hunter, DDG, Deputy Director General, National Department of Health. Thank you, ma'am, for being on stage. Joining in virtually, a member of the bench, Gauteng Division of the High Court of South Africa, Judge Sulet Potterell. Judge is online. Can I get indication that Judge is tuned in? Thank you very much. The Judge is tuned in. Dr. Henk Boshoff, he's on the stage, wearing a lovely suit, closest to me. Full-time Commissioner at the South African Human Rights Commission, who are also partners of this event. So thank you so much, Dr. Boshoff. Mr. Johan Kotze, the CEO of Agri-SA. Thank you, sir, for joining us, and that's a beautiful jacket you've got there. Professor Nick Olivier, Senior International Consultant and Advisor and Extraordinary Professor, Noordwys Universiteit. Hy is ook my oom. Baie verwelkom, oom. Ms. Karina Miller, Chief Education Specialist, Department of Basic Education, specifically focusing on the Nutrition School program. Karina here? I haven't seen Karina yet. If things should change, I would gladly make a further introduction of Karina, as well as Mr. Neil Coleman, co-founder of the Institute of Economic Justice. Karina is online, thank you very much. Karina is joining virtually, so thank you, Karina, and I beg your pardon for assuming you would be here. Mr. Neil Coleman then seems to be the one who is MIA. Let's hope that he is safe wherever he is and everything goes according to plan. He is obviously welcome to join us at any given time for the purposes of continuing. I understand he is coming, so we will get the program going. The time is 10:32, and this session is scheduled to go for 2 hours. The proposal is, as where the guests are, there are a couple of microphones where they are. The guests will sit down and make their contributions as they're sitting down. We're trying to make now less formal of the occasion. Also, we are looking forward to today having question and answer sessions, because it is important to get the thoughts, the views, and perspectives of everybody in this room, and there's as much value in having questions that are answered as there is in having substantive contributions from those who are panelists on the stage. I'll quickly now go through the names of the members of the panel closest to me. Dr. Henk Boshoff from the Human Rights Commission, Mr. Sina Lushen from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, Ms. Janet Rebecca Hunter, DDG, Department of Health, National Department of Health, Professor Nick Olivier from Northwest University, as well as Mr. Johan Kotze, the CEO of Agri-SA. Ladies and gentlemen, this is now session 2. We are officially underway. If I can just ask, and we're literally going to move from left to right or right to left. So Dr. Boshoff, you can sit there, and you've got your initial 8 minutes just to make your contributions. Dr. Boshoff, one of my colleagues is at the back there. If she gets the idea that you are forgetting to review your watch, she will just make a kind note to you, and I'll probably just give you a gentle tap on the shoulder somewhere. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, we'll start playing the music and we will drown you out. That will certainly mean something to you. I hope not to have to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of applause to our panel as we start. Dr. Boshoff.
Absolutely. Thank you. Right. Thank you so much, Program Director. And good morning to everyone. On behalf of the South African Human Rights Commission, I wish to extend our appreciation, that is the appreciation of the South African Human Rights Commission, to Professor Madonsela and her team at the Center for Social Justice for inviting us to participate at this time-year's event. As we, the Commission, similarly grapple with issues of hunger, the right to food, the right to health care, and the right to life. The right to food is one of the most pressing human rights issues in the world. It is also one of those rights that should have been realized by now, not only in South Africa, but worldwide. Hunger and the biological need for food is not a social, religious, or political construct. It is not an ideology or political philosophy. Hunger does not discriminate according to race, gender, geographic location. Yet, it has become a socio-political, economic issue determined by race, class, economic, and social status. As something that affects every single one of us, it is untenable that in 2024, we are still trying to realize the right to food. And in South Africa, according to the experiences of the South African Human Rights Commission, the situation is not only dire, but it's also deteriorating. In the Free State Province, we recently held an inquiry into local government. We actually summoned all the municipalities in the Free State Province. We invited Chapter 9 institutions. We invited provincial departments, national departments to come and make inputs. And while food and health were not direct themes tackled at the inquiry, it was apparent that the challenges at local level impacts on food security, especially in a rural and agrarian province like the Free State Province. The lack of water impacts large-scale farmers, but also subsistence farmers. We heard testimony from locals who attested that businesses are severely impacted by either no water or polluted water. This also has a negative impact on the local economy, which directly contributes to increases in poverty and the rise of malnutrition and, in particular, undernutrition. This is corroborated by a 2020 study which found that environmental conditions play a role in children's nutrition and growth. Access to clean water and sanitation is a direct contributor to risks of infection and poor nutritional status in children. As the South African Human Rights Commission, we have determined that the problem is also rife in the Eastern Cape, and in 2022 we released a report into child malnutrition and the right to food. We found that the state had failed to prevent child malnutrition throughout the country. We also found that the child support grant and the school feeding schemes were insufficient for the realization of children's rights to a nutritious diet. A mixed method study conducted in the Free State Province found that people do not consume enough milk and vegetables. Rather, diets consist of a lot of starches and sugar. This study was conducted in rural as well as urban areas. Measuring food security is about much more than estimating volumes of food or regular access to it. People must also eat enough different types of food to stay healthy. The consequences of hunger and food insecurity are dire. Not only is there a direct violation of the rights to food, health care, and life, but it places additional burdens on the state. The risk to children is even more urgent, and undernutrition can lead to diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease in adulthood. Proper nutrition is required for growth, mental, and cognitive development in childhood. As I indicated earlier, food insecurity has reached untenable levels. The long-term consequences, especially in this time of austerity, are dire. The inadequate support for hungry people today will only lead to their illness tomorrow. The cost of providing everyone with adequate and nutritious food today is far less than the cost on the healthcare system later. It is far better to feed a pregnant woman well today than to pay for specialized care and educational services for an underdeveloped child tomorrow. Given the systemic and structural Goliaths of inequality, poverty, and unemployment as causes of food security, we must face them directly in order to attain Sustainable Development Goal 2. And while I have sought to highlight some of the health, economic, and social consequences of not attaining Sustainable Development Goal 2, I must emphasize that the right to food is a human right in and of itself, and all of us are responsible for the realization of that right. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boshoff. Next speaker, Mr. Lushen. You can sit there, you can make the presentation here, whichever your preference is. Quickly, can I just confirm from the side here to my left, are you able to see the gentleman or the lady on the podium with the interpretation here? Sorry, sir. May I ask, is it possible to have the interpretation here? Will this be a problem? I'm just trying to make sure that all views, okay, so that is not possible. Give me a second, please. Can I ask you to step a little bit back? Step a little bit back, is that possible? Is that okay? Thank you very, very much, appreciate that. Mr. Lushen?
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. I would just like to also to echo previous speakers, all protocol observed, but I would like especially to acknowledge the role of Professor Tuli Madonsela in organizing this occasion. Now, colleagues, I think previous speakers have mentioned about the aspiring food insecurity in the world. 2.3 billion people or somewhere there. But out of that, 1/3 of those people are in Africa. And bringing it down further, coming home, 61 million people are food insecure in Southern Africa. Now, the sombering aspect is this, that food insecurity has been increasing continuously, a trajectory of increasing food insecurity. In 2012, there were 5.5 million food and nutrition insecure people in Southern Africa. As we speak now, there are 61 million food insecure people in Southern Africa, and I'm using that as an example, and also because we are sitting in Southern Africa. Why is this trajectory continuing? That's the question. Why hasn't it been stopped? I think that brings in the angle of social justice. What it means is that the approach that we have been using in trying to address food and nutrition insecurity and hunger has not been working. Because if you continue on, trying to address a challenge in the same way for over a decade, and you continue on, then there is really concern. So I think they're looking at food insecurity and hunger from a perspective of being a human right could bring some traction in ensuring that food insecurity and hunger is addressed in Africa. There are opportunities that are there. There are experiences, there are good practices that are there to change the trajectory. Let me mention this from my experience in Southern Africa in the last 13 years, and I ran across all these countries from Madagascar to Angola, from Tanzania, into Limpopo, Guiana. Most of the challenges or the drivers of food insecurity is climate change, number one. And in saying that, particularly drought. And if you go into the data, which I'm sure University of Stellenbosch and other think tanks have, you will see that. So what it brings in is the need to tackle the water, energy, as well as food and environment nexus. We need to change the way that our agri-food systems operate and how they are configured. We need to move away from simply relying on the rains. Once the rains come, and if a farmer is not able to grow their crop because of the drought or drought conditions, everything goes. If a farmer, if there is poor establishment of pasture, the livestock farmer is doomed. There's no water. So it's those things on the ground. I want to focus on those because I think that is where change is needed. 2 weeks ago, we were in a meeting with SADC, and we were discussing the usual. FAO holds these regular meetings with SADC. SADC said, we have enough policies. What we need, the governments are saying, we want action on the ground. Those policies that are there need to be translated into action that will ensure that we start adopting resilient pathways that will ensure that the food, first of all, has to be produced. We have to drop the seed. Doesn't matter what. That's the starting point when we are discussing about agri-food systems. The seed, and then on into the value chains, going into the into the supplies, the distribution, and so forth, right up to the labeling in the shop and the kitchen. If there is failure at the bottom, we will not get anywhere. Let me give you one example. I'm also trying to look at the Master of Ceremony, whether he's happy with me. But I'll give you an example. This year, most of Southern Africa had the worst drought due to the El Nino in maybe 40 to 100 years. And then SADC made an appeal for support across the international community. I can tell you, of all the clusters that are there, the agricultural cluster got the lowest support to date, at least by the data by September. And the UN monitors these inflows of support. 7.5%, but it's a drought. The farmers need to be resuscitated, they need to be supported, to restore production. When you are a farmer, farming is not just about you producing food. You want to produce also to sell. If you have not sold, you are done. So when you have this systematic or persistent failures I mentioned over the last 12 years or so, of you are being eroded, your capacity to produce is being eroded, then there is an issue. That is one area we need to, there has to be investment in that part of the segment of the agri-food systems. And then we need to bring together, of course, everyone to talk together, the governments, academia, civil society, the private sector to come aboard. With that, there will be change. There will be change. But most important is the goodwill and political will from governments. I think I'll end my presentation here. Thank you.
No, for sure. We're going to have the DDG make the presentation, and of course, I am just confirming that the presentations from the online platform will follow this presentation by Ms. Hunter, who is the DDG in the National Department of Health. Following this presentation, if we could please get contributions from the judge, as well as contributions from Ms. Miller, who are both joining on the virtual platform. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. To the moderator, Mr. Nqaba Mabekwe, thank you for this opportunity for us as the National Department of Health of South Africa to share our perspective on this topic. The problem of hunger and starvation is expressed very well in the quote from Judge Dennis Davis at the beginning of the concept note to this summit, the 6th Summit on Social Justice. Chronic hunger and starvation form a vicious cycle with healthcare. Access to the best possible healthcare amounts to nothing if the immune system of an individual is not in a state to put that healthcare to good use. And we know that optimal nutrition is the fuel, as a fuel, is the main immune system booster. This can be a cycle of virtue where people have access to optimal nutrition, but very, very sadly, the reality is that there are too many South Africans who are in a vicious cycle because of hunger and starvation. This is especially profound in the case of a fetus being carried by its pregnant mother. In the case of a newborn baby, the child under 1 year and the child under 5 years of age. I deliberately put emphasis on these important developmental milestones in the life cycle of human beings because this early phase of human development is of utmost importance for cognitive, emotional, and physical development, a process needed for humans to have social justice. South Africa has an early childhood development index called the Thrive by 5 Index. And this index underscores the importance of the first 5 years of life in shaping a child's future because this phase of life is pivotal for cognitive, emotional, and physical development. For us in healthcare service delivery, it is important that South Africa addresses the social, economic, and commercial determinants of health. When we examine the causes of mortality of children attended to in our health facilities, the lack of knowledge of the caregivers is often found to be the #1 root cause of children's health problems. Education is therefore a key determinant of health, but educators will tell you the same thing I am telling you here today, that the lack of optimal nutrition is in a vicious cycle with a human being's ability to learn. Amongst others, South Africa's health system provides access to antenatal care for pregnant women, access to information on optimal nutrition, and here our program to encourage and enable breastfeeding is especially important. We provide access to life-saving and development-enhancing childhood immunizations, We provide access to well baby clinics where developmental milestones are assessed and attended to when needed. And yes, this access is provided in the most rural areas of South Africa. However, the point I make is that all this access amounts to very, very little where families are faced with hunger and starvation. It is therefore important that wherever we work, whatever our area of expertise is, that we all firstly thrust our weight behind those areas which are key to human development. As health activists, we call for health in all policies, meaning that no policy should be developed without taking into consideration what effect it will have on the health of the human being. But health is but one facet in the multifaceted requirements of human development. Food security and food safety is key for human development, and therefore, as the health sector of South Africa, we remain committed to make the necessary contributions in this important area. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Madam DDG.
Thank you so much, Madam DDG.
Nothing changes, just that they will be appearing on your screens. We're going to go to our two participants who are tuning in on the virtual platform. First, Judge Potterill, and then immediately thereafter, Ms. Miller. I won't come back in between the two speakers, so as soon as the one speaker is done, if we could have the second speaker, please. Judge, good morning. Thank you for joining us. It's clear skies in Cape Town. The sun is out. We are looking forward to going to the beach not long from now. We don't know about you.
You liar. Good morning, everybody. All protocol observed. I just want to say from the bottom of my heart again that I have so much respect and admiration for the people under the guidance of the Prof and the University of Stellenbosch for having these summits. My eyes were opened the last time that I attended, and I've spread the information. Information is just a wonderful thing. I've spread it to my church, I've spread it to my colleagues, I've spread it to everybody I know. And one of my friends the other day came to me and said, the guy that was delivering her package, she looked at him and he looked thin and tired, and she asked him, "Are you hungry?" And he said yes, and she went to the kitchen and got him some food. So if each of us can just do that, but we know that that's not good enough, but if we can just start in our circle. So from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for the information of the desperation of hunger out there that not everybody is aware of. So my task is, what can the judiciary do to help with zero hunger? And let's start at the Constitution. We all know that we have this wonderful two clauses in the Constitution. We have Section 27(1)(b) that gives everybody in South Africa access to the right to food and to sufficient food. It expressly states. And then we have the guarantee in Section 28(1)(c) of the Constitution that says every child is entitled to basic nutrition. So the legislature has spoken. We have got the ink on paper, but what has that resulted in? Is why do we have hunger? And we can come to no other conclusion that as far as the other arms of state is concerned, sadly, very little has happened. As for the judiciary, my only claim to fame, why I'm here today, is that I wrote the judgment in Equal Education versus the Minister of Education when the school nutrition program wasn't rolled out during COVID. And I entertained the matter because it was brought on urgent court. The papers were very, there were many affidavits. So the judges on the urgent court didn't want to do it because they didn't have time to really entertain it. So as the acting deputy judge present, I took the matter. You cannot have a prayer that kids must have food and then say it can only be heard 2 weeks later. What do they do in the meantime? Um, the position was that I ordered the minister to roll out the program. It was rolled out in certain sections, but in most sections not. And I also gave a supervisory interdict, which is often frowned upon by, of course, government. And I suppose rightly so, because here the judiciary is now telling the government what they must do, and in fact, keeping an eye on them. So it's seen as overreaching. But sometimes you've just got to do what you've got to do. I did take cognizance of the Constitutional Court, who is also wary to give supervisory remedies, but it was done. And thankfully, this wonderful program that must absolutely be applauded because it gives children at least one nutritious meal a day. So the government must be applauded for this program. What I want to say is, what can the judiciary itself do? It can do nothing, I'm afraid to say, because we can't initiate anything. So if something is brought to us, of course, we can give a judgment, or we can tell the government, do whatever you're supposed to do in terms of the policy. And I must, first of all, as a citizen, and secondly, as a judge, express my thanks to the NGOs in South Africa, because in the last 10 years, the litigation we've had before us on anything pertaining to social justice has been driven by NGOs. And I accept that that is a big challenge because there's costs involved, there's resources involved, and most NGOs, that's their problem. In this matter I had before me, there was a vast amount of affidavits from principals, from teachers, from children themselves, telling me in the affidavit, which is then seen as evidence, of how hungry they are and how they cannot study because of this. Without that evidence and without NGOs playing their part in this social justice that we so struggle to realize, I couldn't have given the judgment that I've given. And unfortunately, the judgment doesn't directly approach Section 27 of the Constitution. Because it's urgent court, because you do it easily, it was actually easy for me because the minister himself had said, or the previous ministers had said, that this program was initiated because without food, there cannot be education because the children can't concentrate, which of course is true. So it was easy for me to couple the right to food to education because that is what was on the facts presented to me. One can't always go wider than what's the facts that are presented to you. And in urgent court, you often don't have the time to do that. You must get this order out. So the judiciary does have a role to play because we are hampered sometimes in what we can do. One government often says that we are overreaching. And the remedies are always quite vague that you can give, like just and fair or an appropriate remedy. But thank goodness the Constitutional Court in Forsyth has said to us that appropriate remedy means you must address the human right. You must fix whatever is wrong with the human right that is brought before you. So that gives you a wide discretion. And although I see a lot of academics and sometimes judges are scared in what remedy they can give, I think if you keep that in your back pocket, then you can address whatever is before you, even if it does mean to give a supervisory interdict. The second thing is, of course, Section 27 gives the government a back door because it says the right to food is once again coupled to available resources. So often they will come to us and say, well, yes, we should give food, for instance, not that this has happened, but we haven't got the money. But what I learned from being here last time is that there is enough food in our country. That is what makes it so sad. It's not a question of there's not enough food in our country. It's just not distributed. So I think one could get past available resources. And of course, lawyerly things can happen, like what is sufficient food, because there's no definition, obviously, of what sufficient food is. But I mean, there's enough international instruments and enough clever NGO lawyers that will be able to tell a court exactly what is sufficient food for a person. So the court must utilize sections 38 and 1721B of the Constitution and give remedies that will really address the problem. The good news is that in section 27, there's also a positive duty on the government to address the right to food. And the way they should do that is by means of policy. So I think the summit is an absolute beautiful platform to constitute policies, to help the government to get a policy into place. And then we, as the judiciary, if they don't do them, can compel them to do so. I think that's basically what I want to say shortly about what the judiciary can do. And it must be done. And thanks again for the summit, because as we all know, a hungry person is not a free person. Thank you very much.
No, certainly. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Judge in Chambers, Judge Sulet Potterell, Gauteng Division of the High Court. Staying on the virtual platform, let's please welcome and anticipate thought-provoking views from Ms. Karina Miller, CES, Chief Education Specialist in the Department of Basic Education, specifically in the School Nutrition Program.
Thank you. All protocol observed. I would like to appreciate the opportunity to present on the National School Nutrition Program on this platform. Now, the National School Nutrition Program has been initiated, or a school feeding program initiated by the former President Nelson Mandela in 1994. Now, in initiating a school feeding program, we address quite substantially some of the sustainable development goals as part of policy mandates. We look at no poverty, because a child that can be fed can study and hopefully finish the senior certificate. We look at zero hunger. And then also we believe that providing the nutritious meals will also aid quality education. So when we look at the National School Nutrition Program and we look at how it evolved, started in 1994, and it was called the Primary School Nutrition Program, and it only focused from grade 1 to 7. But then it was transferred to basic education, because it was first initiated at in Department of Health. And what we have done is we have expanded the program to secondary schools. So at the moment, we are looking at providing 9.7 million learners with a meal from grade R to grade 12. Where we get the mandate from, or the funding from, is from National Treasury. That gives us a conditional grant that's linked to the Division of Revenue Act, and it links for the 2024-25 financial year to 9 billion rand, which is quite a lot of funding. What we look at the National School Nutrition Program, if we look at the program, we would like to address hunger, malnutrition, and micronutrient deficiencies. But it's also part of the basic education system, where we would like to also say that we give learner access to education in our primary and secondary and identified special schools. Then also, where we are implemented in the Department of Basic Education, we form part of the care and support for teaching and learning framework, which support learners to stay in school. Then, like I alluded before, we look at a total budget for 9 billion rand for the 2024-25 financial year, and this is funding we derive from National Treasury. And then we have a conditional grant framework that has to be approved to implement the program. When we implement the program, it's important to note that there's 3 legs that we look at: school feeding, which is mainly the meals that we provide in school; nutrition education, to advocate on the healthy eating patterns; and then also school food gardens that we would like to aid the meals that we provide in school. Then, if we just look at the NSNP and see around 2010, we provided 73% of learners with meals, but we can also see poverty as a problem or a challenge in the country because at the moment from 73%, we are providing about 84% of learners with the National School Nutrition Program. So when you look at the National School Nutrition Program, what does it provide? What does it exist of? Firstly, it's very important that we give safe food. So we align with Department of Health's Food Stuffs, Cosmetics and Disinfectant Act. We look at the South African Food-Based Dietary Guidelines. We have food specifications that we align with Department of Health. And then also the food items that we have in our basket is for safe meals that we provide at school. So when we talk about safe meals that we provide, currently we've introduced a breakfast porridge that we want the learners to start off with. And then we have a cooked lunch meal. Now the cooked lunch meal consists of 5 proteins that we advocate to have a variety with a cooked starch and then a fruit or vegetable that we want learners to eat every day. So it's also important that we look at food safety interventions because we do cook these meals at school, and part of the safety interventions that we are looking at is our school kitchens because infrastructure is quite a challenge at school, but we work closely with the environmental health section in municipalities to get our kitchens compliant. We provide food safety workshops, and we also collaborate further, work in districts with Department of Health and municipalities to form food safety teams. And part of that is to assist also with workshops and also to evaluate our kitchens. Then it's important with nutrition education that we coordinate and so that we make sure that there's regular messages that goes to learners in school. Then it's also important to note that South Africa also got a global footprint that we are closely working with the Global Child Nutrition Foundation, and then in the study countries, we work with the School Meals Coalition. So this is basically, in a nutshell, the National School Nutrition Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Much appreciate your thoughts. Please stay tuned, and as we continue with the contributions back here now, we will certainly be coming back to you with questions, of which I have no doubt there are some from the floor, both to you and the Honorable Judge. Professor, you want to sit there? You want to come here? It's your option, certainly. Professor Viljoen.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So before my 8 minutes start, and before the music starts playing, I would just like to brief from my personal perspective, I would like to honor and salute Prof. Thuli. Thuli, if I may say, you have been and you are like a lighthouse, a beacon of hope in South and Southern Africa. And what you have meant and what you're meaning and the work that you do and the passion with what you do, that has really affected all of us here, but millions of our countrymen and countrywomen and kids. And I would like to say many of them are voiceless. But I think if you go to the dusty streets far away from where we are, sitting in relative luxury here, and the word Madonsela comes up, they say, but we know about Thuli. So thank you so very, very much. From the depth of my heart, thank you, Thuli. Mr. Chair, I assume that the 8 minutes starts now, and the music will then also be delayed. So, without further ado, and what I can't finish now, I hope that during the discussion there will be some time to sort of put this in. So, briefly, some of the issues. So, I'll be speaking about the global framework, the African framework, the South African framework, what is happening in South Africa, what has been happening, and what is happening at this very moment as we sit here, and what will be happening. So it's a brief overview. Firstly, we need to take cognizance of the fact that the United Nations Council on Food Security has enhanced the 4 dimensions of food security to include also agency and sustainability. And I hope that will become part of our discussion in South Africa and our commitment also to address these 2 additional issues. Secondly, the context in which we operate is and I'm just mentioning a few of them, the 4th industrial revolution with disruption, chaos, uncertainty, conflict, change, resulting also in growing inequality. And I think that we must stress, so we have to address this. We have to become agile, and we have to deal with artificial intelligence. These are just some of the elements. Secondly, the climate change landscape. Thirdly, the biodiversity and soil and natural resources health landscape. The resilience, fourthly, the resilience and disaster management landscape. Very importantly, also the sustainable food systems landscape, that's number 5. And number 6, very important, the 2024 Nobel Prize for Economics was awarded to 3 academics, and they got to work for, and that follows on what Professor Madonsela has said earlier, about what are the legacies of the past? What is the systemic, and if I may add, the structural inequalities? And their view is that those inequalities that we find today in the world, all over the world, and especially in the so-called developing countries, is a result of structural and systemic inequalities brought about by the footprint of the colonialization of so many areas of our world. So that is a clarion call that we have to address both the structures and the systems. So no longer just panel beating. It's real transformation, even more than transformation. It's inventing something new. Then the binding agreements, or the binding conventions, treaties, and the protocols, I'm not going to deal with that, but from a non-binding perspective, not legally binding, we have entered into a number of very important commitments, like many other countries around the world, I must say. First, at international level, the SDGs. Then, in Africa, Agenda 2063, which I think is not sufficiently emphasized and analyzed by academics and by other people involved in this process. And very importantly, in that context, also, that's the Africa we want by 2063. There's a second new 10-year implementation plan that we have to also take cognizance of. And then, of course, the very important CAADP, the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, as well as the Malabo Declaration from 2014 to 25, also dealing with issues of hunger, food insecurity, stunting, etc. And a new Malabo-type declaration is currently being drafted and prepared, and we as a country also contributing to that process. Malabo 2, I call it for want of a better word. As far as the Constitution is concerned, we've already been given an overview by the Honourable Judge. I'd just like to add, we have to remind ourselves that the Constitution gives also an absolute right to children, as has been indicated, but also to detained and sentenced prisoners. They also have an absolute right to adequate nutrition, and there are also a number of international conventions that we have signed, and that is the reason why the UN come from time to inspect also South African prisons. Then, as far as South Africa, first the Constitution, the second part is after you've got the Constitution, you have policies and legislation. But as far as legislation is concerned, the only socio-economic right that we do not have a separate act in South Africa is the one dealing with food security. I want to repeat this. The only socio-economic right that we do not have a specific act is the one guaranteeing the detail of the right to food. All the others, education, water, housing, social security, and health, we have acts, but not for this one. Why? Why? I'm not asking you to respond now, but I've always been asked, but now we have to move forward. Now we have to move forward. Then the RSA policies, and I'm rushing because like a machine gun, so the 2030 National Policy for Food, Nutrition and Security, much of it has not been implemented. But there is a new commitment. So when I say these things, I'm not criticizing with a glass of red wine or even a cup of black coffee in my hand. So, but we have to state the facts. Secondly, the 2018 National Food and Nutrition Security Plan for South Africa 2018 to 23, which if I may use the word, a devastating evaluation report was done by the Department of Performance Management and Evaluation in 23, where they say the impact targets after 5 years, 0% have been attained. 0% of the impact. And as far as the objective performance indicators are concerned, there were 63, only 17% have been met when they did the survey last year. And then they come up with a plan. I also say that DPEM is playing a very important role. Coming back to the institutional level, which departments, there's a whole list of government departments that are involved in this. Challenge is that there are, thank you, just deduct it from my 8 minutes, please. Well, add it to my, not deduct, add it to my 8 minutes, please. The various departments, for example, in 2014, the Department of then Rural Development and Land Reform was responsible to coordinate all the food security issues, Outcome 7. There was never an Outcome 7 report submitted by that department to Parliament. And at a meeting that the Public Service Commission called, they asked the then DG, no longer the DG of the successor department, where is any of those reports, because you have to publish it, make it available at least within government every year. No, we've never come to that. We've been not able to do that. That was in 2019, the meeting at the Public Service Commission. Okay, so we have to deal with coherence. We have to deal with coordination. We have to ensure that our policies, that they align. But not only our policies. Actual fact, our programs must also be aligned. So you have the constitution, you have the policies, you have the institutions, and now going to implementation, you have to ensure that your programs and your projects and your resources are all aligned. Human, financial, technical, and infrastructure are aligned. Then perhaps I could just say that we had a very negative report, the biannual review 3, and we scored for ending hunger. That's all the African countries report to the African Union. We got 1,98 out of 9.26 for the indicator dealing with ending hunger, one of the lowest in Africa. Secondly, the census is generally recognized is not reliable, so we cannot use the census figures. Fortunately, the Department for Agriculture and CSIR and HSRC, Department of Science and Technology, made an very important report, which is, I think, compulsory reading for many of us. I'm not saying for all of us, because many of you might have read it, in 2023. And that was about what is the level of food insecurity, of hunger and stunting. 63.5%, according to the report which was published and ventilated, so to speak, by the Minister about 2 weeks ago, Minister of Agriculture. 63.5% of South Africans are food insecure, and 28.8% of our 0 to 5 years are stunted. As far as the process that is ongoing now, and there are very positive movements, I hope that there will be a situation to deal with that when I'm back. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Olivier. I would have given you an extra minute if you didn't ask that I deduct that minute.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Olivier, Northwest University. Mr. Coleman is coming up, I understand. Okay, very well. Are you going to stay there, Neil, or are you going to come up here? Very well. Neil Coleman, co-founder, Institute for Economic Justice. After that, we will then go to AgriSA, CEO, Mr. Johan Kotze. Start preparing your questions, ladies and gentlemen, because this is going to demand some robust debate, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chair, and Prof. Madonsela in the center, all protocol observed. Prof. Olivier said something about prisoners that reminded me of my own experience. In 1986, I was detained under the state of emergency, and there were a few of us in Diepkloof prison, and to punish us, they withheld food. And we complained that we were hungry. And the district surgeon came and he said, no, in terms of the scientifically determined calories which are required, you're getting sufficient calories and you're getting what you need. But we were hungry. And that relates to something I want to raise later, the question of these definitions of what constitutes food insecurity, what constitutes hunger, what constitutes vulnerability. I think reading the literature is problematic and requires some review. I think, as a number of speakers have said, we can assert certain truths. Hunger in South Africa and globally is man-made. There's sufficient food to feed everybody. Thirdly, hunger is being used as a weapon of war, and in the case of Gaza, a weapon of genocide. The ravages of hunger in South Africa and elsewhere may be less obvious and brutal than that in Palestine, but it is no less real. Hunger can be eradicated or massively reduced in a short period of time, as President Lula showed in the early 2000s with the Zero Hunger campaign in Brazil, where Brazil was one of the worst countries in terms of hunger, and it was taken off the FAO food map, or sort of hunger map, after they embarked on the Zero Hunger campaign, and it was so successful. People will tell you that hunger and food security is complex. It relates to food systems, retail monopolies, eating habits, and so on and so on. This may be the case, but there is also a simple truth. If people don't have sufficient income to buy sufficient food, they will constantly face the specter of hunger. High unemployment, income poverty, low wages, and lack of adequate social security is a toxic combination that breeds hunger and malnutrition. Imagine if every South African was guaranteed a basic income floor sufficient to meet their basic food needs. My institute, the Institute for Economic Justice, conducted a study on the relationship between hunger, income, poverty, and social protection, which has been mailed to delegates thanks to the center, and hopefully you would have a look at it and we would appreciate feedback. But it reached 4 basic conclusions. Firstly, food insecurity in South Africa is closely tied to income poverty, with millions of households struggling to access sufficient nutrition, despite the country producing enough food for everyone. Secondly, expanding social protection, particularly through universal basic income, is key to addressing hunger. Thirdly, by reducing income poverty, a big can help ensure that people have the money to buy enough food, improving overall health and well-being. And fourthly, over time, reducing food insecurity not only benefits individuals and families and deals with the issue of hunger, but can also support sustainable development by creating a virtuous cycle where improved nutrition leads to higher productivity of the economy, better educational outcomes, and inclusive economic growth. So, just quickly to deal with the current realities relating to income and hunger in South Africa. We have a crisis of income poverty in the country that underpins the crisis of hunger. This is based on a few key realities. Firstly, over 42% unemployment, as we know, 12.4 million people out of work. Over 80% of the unemployed are long-term unemployed, with 3 million having given up looking for work. Secondly, high levels of working poverty, with many people earning too little to afford a basic diet. There's a very important institute called the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice Institute, I think it's called, which regularly on a monthly basis calculates a food basket for children and families. And what they calculated was that about 40% of households with an income of between 2,000 and 5,000 rand experience food insecurity or were at risk of hunger and around 50% of households with an income of between 400 and 2,000 experience food insecurity or were at the risk of hunger. So in other words, people earning just around the national minimum wage were being challenged with food insecurity and food hunger. So the issue of hunger and food insecurity is not just about unemployment. It's also about low wages in the country, and the fact that those who are working have to support many, many unemployed people, particularly the low-paid workers. Thirdly, social grants are below the food poverty line. In particular, the child support grant, which is less than 2/3 of the poverty line of 790 Rand a month, and the 370 SRD grant for adults is less than half the food poverty line. As Prof mentioned, the SRC finds that a shocking 64.7% of all households have expenditure on food per person that amounts to below the food poverty line. This means that nearly 2/3 of South Africans are food insecure. I mentioned at the beginning that there's serious challenges with definition in the literature as to what constitutes hunger, food insecurity, and measuring the depth of a problem. And I think our academics really need to address this particular challenge. How do people feed their children and themselves, given these dire realities? In a WITS study in 2023, a nationally representative survey, they found that one in every five South African households sends a member of the family out to beg for food on a regular basis. When I've pointed this out to people, they said to me, but that's not possible. You know, how in South Africa, which is a middle-income country, can that be possible? But this is the reality. Secondly, many people take on debt to buy food or borrow from friends and family. Many others simply don't cope and face extreme hunger, with some resorting to desperate measures to deal with their situation. Not just crime, but suicide. We heard about the horrific cases in the Eastern Cape of mothers committing suicide with their children because of hunger. So what do we do? As many speakers have pointed out, systemic interventions are needed on transforming food systems, combating concentration and profiteering in the food chain, particularly retail, controlling the prices of basic foods and ensuring their accessibility in poor communities through markets and public outlets, and ensuring a particular focus by the public sector on nutrition for young children through school meals and so on, as we've heard about earlier. Many of these ideas were contained in the Food for All commitments in the ANC's 2009 elections manifesto, but most of these haven't been implemented. These are important, and some of them will take time, but we don't have the time. We need rapid, high-impact interventions which will end the scourge of hunger. Critical here is to ensure people have adequate income for their basic food needs. But before I unpack this, it's important to state that too many interventions which are proposed, no matter how well-meaning, really amount to tinkering around the edges and fail to address the fundamental challenge of income poverty. These include ideas such as food vouchers, subsidies to retailers, and even more VAT exemptions on basics. Some of them may make a contribution, but really they don't get, as Prof said, to the systemic questions. And also will have a major cost to the state, but are not guaranteed to trickle down to those who need them most, and very often are prone to extensive corruption. The evidence in South Africa and internationally is that the most powerful and direct way to assist people to combat hunger is to put income directly into their hands, combined with measures to keep the price of essential foods down and to make them easily accessible to everybody. The evidence is that for the SRD grant, for example, 93% of the grant is spent on food. The child support grant, as important as it is not able to eliminate child hunger. Even if it was raised to the food poverty line, it wouldn't be able to do so. Why is that? That grant does not go to the child, it goes to the family, because there are adult unemployed members of the household who do not have access to any income. So it's shared between the household. And this is why it's so important to have a guaranteed basic income for all members of the household, including adults and children. So the call from civil society has been for a combination of improving the child support grant to the food poverty line with introducing the social relief of distress grant or a basic income also at the food poverty line. This will eliminate extreme forms of hunger. The civil society agreement, and I'm concluding, is that this should be a platform to progressively realize basic income over time up to the upper bound poverty line, but to start off at least at the food poverty line. Research done by my institute and others shows that this is not only affordable, but that it would have many developmental impacts in terms of the stimulus to local economies, to providing a stimulus to small businesses and employment. It would have social savings in terms of health and crime, as other members of the panel have mentioned. The food riots in July 2021, maybe they were political, but they had a strong element of being food riots, cost over 100 billion. That 100 billion could have been used to feed people. Finally, the case we are bringing to the High Court between the Institute for Economic Justice and Pay the Grants campaign, which is being heard in the High Court in Pretoria on 29th and 30th of October, is aimed at securing the constitutional right of SRD grant beneficiaries to social assistance, with up to half of the intended population currently being excluded by exclusionary regulations. It's not only a case to secure social assistance, it's also a case to secure the right to food. Up to 18 million South Africans and over half the South African population, if you include their dependents, stand to benefit if there's a positive judgment which will enable them to access food for themselves and their families. And finally, I want to thank Thuli Madonsela and the Centre for their support for this very important campaign. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you very, very much. Could we have the microphone on for Mr. Kotze, please? Or is he going to come here? No. You choose where you're going to present, certainly, the CEO of Agri-SA. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who have jotted down questions, please prepare yourself to come forward so that we can engage immediately after this presentation now in the debate that is necessary. We're doing well for time. It's 11:36. In 8 minutes from now, we are now opening it up to the floor to engage until 12:30. So please do brace yourselves. Mr. Kotze.
Thank you very much, Professor. I have 3 daughters and a wife, and when I said to them I need to come to Cape Town and talk, they said, Daddy, maybe you just need to tell us about what? And when the one in England saw what it was all about, she phoned me and said, Dad, that lady dresses like a queen. And so it took them 2 hours to dress me. They failed. They failed with the upper beauty from here, so there was no resurrection. The hairs and everything is mine. So I want to do something before we start. You can stand with me, yeah. I can speak Afrikaans, English, German, a bit of Tswana, but this language is extraordinary. Yeah. So we talk about food security, and what dawned on me is, I do not understand your language, but I have a language that's great. And that's the language of love. And I want to tell you something today. I have a mommy who is absolutely fantastic. And my mom always said, can you give me a minute? So I'm asking you, don't put down your cell phones and your laptops and what you can't remember. It's not worth the while. Just listen. Give me 4 minutes. Listen with your heart. I am a farmer. I'm 11th generation in South Africa. And before that, I asked my mom, where did I come from? My mom said, it doesn't matter. You from heaven. And that's what matters. As a farming community, we got together and said to ourselves, what is our role play? And what's the reason for existence in South Africa and in the rest of the world? And 3 things drives our occupation. Population growth, urbanization, now we call it climate change, but it's actually looking after the resources God gave us. So what did we do? We went back and said, let's go beyond all politics. Let's go beyond everything that we understand as farmers. And if I say farmers, it means everybody that puts his hand to the soil. utilize what God gave him to produce. So we don't define small subsistence because sometimes we belittle people and we think they do not contribute. It's not true. So what did we do? We went back and we said to ourselves, what's the reason for existence for us as farmers? And there's one reason. It's food security. And let me define food security. We do have enough food in South Africa, by far. But we are not food secure if Botswana is not food secure. We are not food secure if Lesotho is not food secure. We are not food secure if Namibia is not food secure. So food security is defined, not me having enough food. I grew up in a small community, and the way we lived was if I have enough food, but my neighbor, irrespective of who they were not food secure. My little community were not food secure, wasn't food secure. So that's the first concept. The second one is food security is not just a farming concept, it's a value chain. Now the value chain we define as a food system. So Woolies in the towers, I've been begging there in the towers, being a farmer, being in the pig industry a while ago. They play as a great part as the farmers in the whole system. And I can tell you why. Because we waste 30% of what is produced. Which means, and they did the calculations, we waste about 16 million tons of food in South Africa every year. If you utilize that, it can feed 40 million people. So the take is, there's a great value play in who we are as a system, and it's not just farmers. So 3 things, I want to tell you what we agreed on as farmers to say, we need to have food. So we understand food security is the availability, the affordability, nutritious and safe and quality food. And then there's a 4th thing, which we say we need to do it in such a sustainable way that our children would be able, or the people after us, also to maintain what we've done. If we look into it, and I thought of what are we going to say about today as farmers, 3 things we can do. We're going to produce food. So we need to have food to feed people. So that's the first thing. The second thing is we create an economy in rural areas. And rural poverty is devastating. So we need to focus on how to create a new economy in the rural areas. And we need to put focus as agriculture into it. The third thing is maybe a controversial thing, because a lot of people see us as just people utilizing what we have. We're actually the guys who maintain the earth, because we work with it every day. So you won't believe it, but I'm a greenie. I'm a tree hugger. Why? Because this is why we exist. We work with nature every day. So gone are the days that activists fighting farmers. Why don't we fight a planet that's depleting? Because we share exactly the same concern, and we need to pick into it. So I want to finish up by asking you a question. I know what I'm going to do when I'm leaving here. I'm going to go on the plane, and then I'm going to farm, and I'm going to produce food in the most sustainable way I can. I want to ask you a question. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And you know what the pity is? 90% of the time, when we leave here, we forgot about what happened here. We only have a picture, and we want to show people, I've been with a prof. Or I met a crazy guy with a jacket and his girls dressed in. It's all I could remember. I'm asking you, what are you going to do? And you know what dawned on me? South Africa's hunger is not with a professor that's going to come up with a new idea and a new law is what we need. I don't mind that. It starts with everybody taking responsibility and saying, what can I do to feed people? What can I do to contribute? This morning I went for a jog, and at this big stadium, there's a little place there with squatters. I stopped there, and I said, God, what can I do as a farmer if I see this? I know they don't have food. I can see it. You don't need to be clever if you see how people live. And what dawned on me again, whatever I can do with what I have, I'm going to do it. So I'm going to end off as a farmer. As a farming community, we are committed to look after this planet. We farm with it in the best way we can so that the next generation would be wealthier as us in the resources that we left them. The second promise is, if I leave here, we're going to continue to grow food, to make sure that people are food secure. Thank you.
You don't want to sit there.
A reality check brought on to all of us by Johan. Thanks, Johan, and we appreciate the emotions with which your contributions came. We've got all the thinking we need on the stage right now. You've got a multilateral platform that's represented. You have a Human Rights Commission, a Chapter 9 institution. You've got the farmer who's actually there to work the earth and make sure that we have food on our table. You've got academia, policy custodians. There's everything we need. We even have the activism coming from Neil Froneman from a justice perspective. And the question is, how has anybody in this room been moved to participate in this conversation, to move the needle forward? We have the judge who came on and said, our hands are tied. We can only do so much, and that is from the time that a litigation is brought to us. And even then, we are limited by the papers that are before us. We can't come up with a solution that hasn't been put to us and hasn't been tested by law, as it were. You've got contributions from the Department of Education with what little scope they have to ensure that they eat into child hunger, particularly around school feeding programs. Even then, that only takes the needle one movement forward, 1 meal a day for 10 months in a year given. And then you've got COVID that threatens all of that. What's happening on the ground? How are you moved? What are you going to do today? You know, when you talk about 16 million tons, Johan, of food being wasted, I couldn't help but just recall the last time I emptied out the fridge and took food out that I'd bought that was just sitting there because I was too lazy to prepare it from earth, and it went straight back to earth in its original form. And how I've got the luxury to even do that. All of us in this room went downstairs and had an option of something with biltong and cheese or something sweet or coffee, or better yet, the option not to take anything that was there. Why? Because you guaranteed your next meal. You even have a preference as to what that would be. And there are so many, millions, who don't know what their option will be, when. So all of us, by being in this room right now, are privileged, are an exception to what has largely been lamented in terms of the failures ultimately in ensuring and securing the one critical ingredient for life, nutrition. It's a basic human condition to eat. It's a right, therefore. It belies everything that speaks to Section 10 of the Constitution, right to dignity. Forget what it says in Section 27, the right to human dignity. There's no dignity in being hungry. So let's have questions. Let's probe this issue. Let's look for collaboration, importantly. And where necessary, for that matter, let us disagree. If you have a question, I'm going to ask you to come through and stand where I am so that the camera can pick you up. If you have a question, I'm going to ask you to please come through. Let's start with a round of 6 questions, and let's see to whom your question is directed. If you have a question, please don't put your hand up. Please come to the front. If you have a question, and I'll take 6 for now, and then we'll do a round, and then we'll do another round of 3, depending what the time suggests. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could also have the contributions from the online platform screened as well, so that the questioners don't forget to probe or to ask questions of Judge Potterill or Ms. Karina Miller from the Department of Education. Please, if you come up, confirm to whom you are asking your question. Please keep the question short. There's always a tendency when you have the microphone to think that you're actually a panelist, whereas the panelists have already been identified. Ask the question, 30 seconds, in and out. Don't think out loud. Ask the question, please. First question, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jabal Mohammed. I work for DEFSA Western Cape. I'm the provincial director, and I've been in this position for 16 years, as well as a TV presenter. Listening to everyone's presentations on the panel, very, very interesting, but I know there are a couple of gaps I'd like to highlight. I do always, wherever I go, like to drop seeds. So whatever you do going forward, always include disabled within that, because that's also a sector that suffer with the issue of hunger. Also, the system itself doesn't naturally always include disabled people and deaf people. They have no access to certain information. The language itself is a barrier. The law of the justice system, there isn't accessibility to that. So normally they don't. So just bear that in mind going forward.
Next question, please.
Oh, sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Francisca Darko. I'm doing my MSc in Stellenbosch University. I also do soup kitchens every month with my colleague Notando, and Lisa is not here. So yesterday I asked this question, but I don't think it was answered in the South African context. So one of the speakers spoke of digitizing farmers to prevent food wastage. So now my question is, what's the feasibility in South Africa? Because I know a lot of farmers throw away a lot of food, like you said, 60 million tons per year. So my question is there some kind of platform where we can say, okay, these farmers or these businesses are saying this is a surplus that is available, and if NPOs and NGOs can, like redistribute that, because as the judge said earlier, the NPOs and NGOs do a lot of work. So yeah, my question is on feasibility of a shared platform where businesses and farmers can put out the surplus to be grabbed by NPOs and NGOs, and this is for the CEO of Agri SA. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Phineas Sebatsani. I work with people experiencing homelessness in Cape Town. And my question is very simple, because the reason why people become homeless is because they don't have food. Some of them commit crime because they don't have food, which is very obvious. And we speak a lot about land. And my question is, in South Africa right now, everybody wants to fight for the land, but capitalism is a very big issue when it comes to young people who are studying agriculture. Okay, you have a skill, but you don't have availability for land, but also you don't have capital to start anything in this country. So I want to know, what are you gentlemen and amazing lady doing to make sure that people actually have the access to land, but also have access to capital to start farming, especially young people in this country? And the third one is that in Cape Town, people spend a lot of their money on transport, especially poor people. And right now in Cape Town, we speak a lot about minimum wage. What are you doing to make sure that actually poor people are paid money to be able not just to have money for transport, but actually they have enough money to take care of their own families? So the issue of minimum wage in South Africa, in Cape Town, what are you guys doing to make sure that actually the poor are not exploited by private sectors? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Wilma D'Souza. I'm from an NGO called Uziko Stellenbosch, based in Jamestown in Stellenbosch. We do youth development work and farming, community farm. Recently, I had a really interesting conversation with an NGO based in the Eastern Cape who are doing farming, community farms and household gardens. And one of the things they told me is that the reason they started up this project is because the ECD Centre that was their primary focus, they noticed the horrendous malnutrition of the children. So they started up these farms, and their primary objective is nutrition for the community. So the idea is the produce that's made goes to feed the family first, goes to feed the neighbours, and then anything that's left over can be sold as income generation. But for the farmers, their primary objective is income generation. So what's happening is that they grow the produce, they sell it all, and then they go and buy fast food with the money. So, as Dr. Henk pointed out, there's so much sugar and bad things going into a lot of our food. So what can be done about changing mindsets in our culture around, healthy eating, what's actually nutritious food and good for us as human beings. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Notera Tingiswayo from Mikaya Primary. I'm a teacher. On the 21st of September, we gathered as former Benson Valiant teachers, whereby we discussed what we can do about the college that was closed. It was a teacher college. Now, when we were discussing, now we decided that we changed the college to be an agricultural college. Now, my question is, how can you help us guys to have that agricultural college? Thank you.
Good day, everyone. Prof. Tulu Mandonsela and honorable speakers. Dr. Boshoff, such an honor to speak to you on this level and engage with you. You spoke about the Free State Province, specifically the local governance, and its input in making food security and health security accessible. And I can testify to that because I am from the Free State Province. But under the administration of former Premier, Mr. Ismail Khashule, the Frieda Dairy Farm project was launched. And it was launched with the goal to empower poor black farmers. And 220 million rand was allocated to this project, I believe. And because of mismanagement of funds, plans, the project did not help to empower, and there was little to no benefit on black farmers. And my question is basically, with this project, how do we involve accountability in terms of there cannot be a realization of food security rights if there is no accountability on the structures that are supposed to realize those rights for us. And you cannot have the topic of food security or health security with excluding the concept of accountability. And with this whole project, like I said, I am from the Free State, and there were some protests, some of them even turned violent, and I just wanted to know who were the structures set up and how were they holding that accountability? Yes. And, Mr. Kutsia spoke about the reasons for farmers is food security. There is no, this was my first thought. There is no food security where there is no accountability too. Yes, there's no food security if there's no food security in Botswana and all that, and I agree, but we need accountability for the structures that are supposed to empower us to enjoy these rights. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We have a couple of microphones on the stage, so we're going to literally just roam around. There were some general questions. There were some specific questions. I see Johan Kotze is deep in thought there, which is great. I don't know if any of the panelists on the virtual platform want to participate, but they will certainly indicate through the team at the technical desk should they wish to. We probably will have enough time for another 3 questions. So if there are burning questions from members of the floor, I'll just literally take the first 3. So if you're number 4, unfortunately, I won't go to you. We do want to give the panelists enough time now to agree, to disagree, and perhaps to respond to whoever it is that has said something which is thought-provoking enough. I've got my 3, and I'm not going to 4. Let's go to the members on the stage or the panelists on stage for their responses, please. And if there's a response, you can either sit there with the microphone or come and stand where I am, please.
These questions will not be easy to respond to. Firstly, let me start with, how we do things as the South African Human Rights Commission. And I referred to a service delivery inquiry that we held in the Free State earlier this year. Now, I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, appearing before the Commission or any other Chapter 9 institution is not a pleasant experience. So when we invited all these municipalities to appear before us, we made it extremely difficult for them. Because, as you know, those of you who are not from the Western Cape, the quality of services that are provided in provinces in general, local government services, is not adequate, is not what people want. Raw sewer flow into the rivers. Criminal cases are opened against municipal managers. In the Free State, I think 6 of them have now been criminally charged. There's inadequate water provision, etc., etc. So we ask these municipalities, what are you going to do to correct this? And many of these municipal managers have said to us, hey, Commissioner, please help us to convince the public to start paying for services. You must do it as the Human Rights Commission, convince the public to start paying for services, not the elected public office bearers. Now, how can people who can't even afford a piece of food, a bread every day, or a slice of bread every day, how can they actually be compelled then to also pay for their services? Now, before I became a perpetual commissioner in 2014, first for 10 years with the Public Service Commission and now with the Human Rights Commission, I also used to work in local government as a municipal manager. And I worked in a metropolitan municipality, the Mangaung municipality in Bloemfontein. And you know what the reality is? The reality is that the funds the municipality generated, that was pre-2014, through rates and taxes, was just enough to pay for the salaries of the employees. No services could be provided without national and provincial grants, and specifically grants by means of the equitable share. Now, isn't it time, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm looking at Professor Madonsela, who also has a lot of experience in this field, isn't it time for government to consider revisiting the funding model, especially equitable share, but not only with regards to local government in general, but also social services? We read in the media, was it this week or last week, about maladministration in SASSA. Maladministration, financial mismanagement, yes, it is happening in local government. It is. It is happening in social development, government departments, etc., and it's something where we will require adequate accountability. And all these structures that have been appointed in terms of the Constitution need to ensure accountability at all times. We met with Minister Motsoaledi, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. When we started to explain to him, hey, Minister, this hospital and that hospital, Charlotte Matkeke and Pelenomi and all these hospitals, you need to intervene there. You know, pregnant ladies are giving birth on the floors of hospitals, etc. And he said to us, you know, you are bringing to me exactly what the Office of Health Standards is bringing, what the Public Protector is bringing, what the Public Service Commission is bringing to me. I will be having a meeting with the Public Service Commission again tomorrow about all these issues. The reality is that the funding model to provide adequate health care is not in line with the needs out there.
Mr. Boshoff?
Yes.
With you, I'm in front of you.
Oh, where?
I'm going to ask that we move the microphone on. I think the essence of the funding model is a critical point that has been made. I would like to give Mr. Kotze an opportunity as well to respond to some of the specific questions that were put to him. Johan, I know you've had enough time now to engage that. I see that Judge Potterall. Judge, would you have a response to any particular question, or do I just see you because you're confirming your participation? Please do confirm if you want to respond so that I can come to you. Okay, very well. Thank you, Judge. Mr. Kotze?
Yeah, so the first one is about the capital. So maybe just, I think when you deal with agriculture, it's a highly complex environment, of which capital is one part. So we've seen in the past, even though you give people a lot of capital, capital is not the only resource to venture in there. However, the greatest concern we have is the barrier to entry for young people into farming is massive. And it's not something that was set up by individuals being farmers. It's just the way we function. So how do you fight climate change? Through technology. Do you understand how expensive technology is? A combiner, 8 million. A spray machine, 12 million. How do you enter into this? So we need to address the complexity. What we did ask a minister for is a development bank, because you can't do that with commercial money. You need to pay money into development and put that money into it. And if there's a default like a drought, you need to overcome that. And how do you do that? People understanding that you won't be able to repay. Then there's a soft issue. My father was a farmer, and I could remember one of the greatest skills my dad had was to survive a drought. It's not financial, it's up here. If you do whatever you love to do, and you see it by once it's gone, or a hailstorm, do you understand how difficult it is? So capital is one, but we need to support young people going into a farming community with far more than what we visually see. So that was the one. The other one about waste. Let me just rectify. It's not 30% wasted on a farm. It's throughout the value chain. So if you go to a retailer, go and ask them how much they waste. But I'll ask you, what are you going to do? So yesterday I sat in the plane coming here, and we had a broodjie, and I had I can't say a Coke because I may not. I had a cool drink, a bit of water, and I saw just the plastic waste that went into it. But you know why they put it in there? Because if that broodjie is squeezed, you won't eat it. So we're guilty. We're guilty in the way that we ask. So there are brilliant concepts. So if we're exporting apples, do you understand that the apple with a little sting on can't go out? You know why? Because you will not buy it when you see it in a retail shop. So it's easy to blame the retailers, but we need to go back and say, how do we do it? So waste, in my mind, is something that's a collective that we need to address and say, how can we do it? Because it's right through the value chain, up from the first where you start with producing, up to the end. Okay, I tried to think about the third one. Yeah, the third one's a nice one. The third question was about sugar. Yesterday, I hit a guinea fowl. I was driving to another place in the Free State to go and address people at the speed of 140 and 120 zone. So I didn't abide to the law. Another law is not going to do it. If people do not understand why not, they don't change their behavior. And my take is, many a times we fight, and we need to have good laws. Johan was wrong in driving 140. But if you understand safety, if you understand, and I justified because I was late, and it was rural, there was nobody, man. So we all do that. So if there's, we all sometimes go 70 in a 60 zone. But that's not That's not the one that limits us and changes our behavior. Our behavior is when I understand that I may not do it because it's going to cause me harm. So my take with sugar and my take with whatever we do, we haven't even spoke about malnutrition in South Africa, obesity, we can go through it all. Individuals are clever enough to understand who they are. And we need to have a conversation on a level where people take responsibility on what they do for themselves. And sometimes we miss this. The last point was about the structures. So we took a decision. And there's some beautiful work that's done by the Global Sustainability Index by The Economist and Corteva Science. Fantastic. And we are the most food secure country in Africa, but we're not food secure. And we took a decision as agriculture, South Africa, meaning the whole food chain, to say, let's go and have a look how it looks like. And then what's our contribution to better this? So you need to put an organized system in place where you can measure this and then you deal towards that. Where we're going to build the next dam in South Africa? You know where? If I'm the minister, forgive me, a long time ago, and my father was a minister, the closest to our farm, where should we build that dam? We should build that dam where there's a massive need in food security. And out of a database, it was confirmed you need to build that dam in Karoo because we need to break new land. And we need to put it down there. So my take with the structures is, we are busy with that. We're going to utilize, there's so many people doing good things. The NGOs are doing yes, there's so much data. We need to put that in and turn that data into intelligence and have foresight and put it back into structures and speak to government, speak to farmers, speak to a community, speak to retailers to utilize that and then better that. That's the structure that's eventually going to help us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Johan. Prof. Olivier, I see you taking notes, and I'm minded to ask if the question from the gentleman who's engaging some of these issues from a Cape Town disposition, if there's anything from what he was probing that you probably have knowledge or expertise on to give him direct responses, if you like, because I'm just looking at the dispositions of everybody else, I think, and I could be wrong, that you're probably best disposed to respond to him.
If I best respond, but anyway, let me give it a try, and then you can judge it. You know, either 3 out of 10 or even a -5 out of 10. Thank you. So very briefly, there are a couple of questions that I would really like to respond to briefly. The issue about the agricultural colleges, it is really a shame that it is totally uncoordinated, because there was a decision in the mid-2015 or just thereafter that agricultural colleges must be moved from the department, National Department of Agriculture, to the Department of Higher Education, Science, blah, 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 blah. Now, unfortunately, although there is this reporting of those post-secondary schooling to the Department of Higher Education, the knowledge and the expertise about agricultural colleges does not exist within that department. So the line functionary responsible for agriculture doesn't have the governance, let's say, powers in this regard. So it's once again split mandates. And that's one of the reasons for the demise, very sad demise in my view, of many of the agricultural colleges. Because nobody wants to do anything because who is the boss? And that's who's the headmaster, so to speak. So that is a key issue. And then also we've heard many promises about agricultural high schools and reintroducing agriculture as a topic at schools. Unfortunately, that has not properly seen the light of day. There's some rare instances, but we really need to address this. So that's that issue. About the Western Cape, the issue about transport, I mean, it's an absolute disgrace that our police services and railway police and whatever else, and the Defence Force could not properly protect during COVID the rail lines in the Western Cape, because rail is much cheaper than buses and taxis. So hopefully this will improve, and we must ensure that we have the necessary security in place on those lines. So there are answers to this. The other issue about the Western Cape, I think it was also access to land. There was a question on this. Apart now from restitution, and that process is not yet finalized, and the skewed ownership, government has acquired prime agricultural land of more than 2 million hectares on the open market. It sits with government. That land should be redistributed. Government has been of the view, and the president has now overruled, let's say, the former Department of Agriculture, saying that the land must be transferred in full ownership. And that is an answer to that somewhat younger than I am person who asked this question. And as far as funding is concerned, we have a new minister responsible for rural development. He has formally asked the president to transfer the land bank from Treasury to the Department of Rural Development so as to enable funding at a very low or a zero rate. So also to have the developmental function with the land bank. And I think that's very positive. And then also as far as young farmers are concerned, one of the findings of this biannual review report, African Union report, which I mentioned earlier, was that our extension services have failed farmers in general and specifically small-scale farmers in the rural areas. So I do believe that there are moves afoot, and I'm very positive about those. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Prof. Just as some of the contributions were coming through, I am minded to pose a question to Ms. Miller from the Department of Basic Education to tie in part with the most recent contribution and the question around agricultural schools and agricultural colleges, albeit that's not necessarily the competency of basic education. But with the amount of land and the schools that are in their thousands, from a perspective of food security, could we not incorporate, for instance, a life skills program or a life orientation program that really looks into utilizing the available land that schools all are to beyond the school feeding program that exists on the behalf of the state, to perhaps even use that land for the community's benefit? Because one of the critiques is that communities, beyond sending their children to school, do not claim that property as a public good. But if, for instance, they could work and till the land and ensure that they get some form of benefit, you might just get other social benefits associated with the protection of that infrastructure. So, Ms. Miller, if something of the kind resonates with what I've said, may I ask that you please respond to that? I think the accountability question has been exhausted, but I would like a response, please, from Mr. Lushen, from best practices in relation to accountability, because I think the South Africa context struggles a lot with that. We've got all the laws, we've got judges who can do their best by even having supervisory orders, but sometimes, as we have seen a couple of years ago with the Department of Social Development, where you get political heads who are just indifferent to responding to what they are told to do by courts, even with a threat of personal liability. How do you inculcate a culture of accountability? What has the world elsewhere shown and taught you so that perhaps we might consider? Those are some of the three questions that I'm posing out there to my fellow panelists. I've got a request for a fourth question despite an agreement that we would have three further questions. Let's take the first three questions and let's see how quickly we go through, lest we might have a fourth question. So on stage, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope the music doesn't play because I speak a lot. So what happened, my name is Ndotana Hadewe. I'm the provincial chair of the newly launched civil society movement, Unmuted Coalition. Reason being unmuted because a lot of times it's been muted. So when I joined this, by mistake, I went to that party because I'm a leader naturally. But now all of the question I was posing there, they've been answered as I was standing. So now my only question would be to Thuli Madonsela. Is it possible that, because seeing that in this room there's so much intellectuals, civil society, NPOs, and they're talking a lot about NPOs, because when I went into NPOs, it was not by mistake, because I lost my shop right here at the Cape Town station. Even though I hate to keep on looking at my name, then Doxy Group, if you go up there, my shop is closed, post-COVID. They don't want to remove my sign, I don't know why, and it's still there. So every time I'm reminded of that. Yesterday I was supposed to be here, then I chose to go to Stellenbosch to do the export because I'm part of a business network. So I'm blaming myself, I should have been here yesterday because then I could have, engaged more. But that's my question to say, can we have this platform with us, civil society, NPOs, lecturers, everybody, in the Western Cape or countrywide, whatever we can. I'm willing to stand and be part of that because it touches me, because as I stand here, I'm homeless. but you won't tell. Why? Because homeless people, they always think people in the street, they are homeless. Some of us are homeless even if we have those shelters which we have, because we don't have our own land. I don't have land in my hands. I've lost land. I've lived in Sea Point. I owned a lot of properties. Yes, COVID came, we can't blame anyone, but I'm still homeless. So when you speak homeless, you must be part of the room, part of the decision making, so that we can speak in that. So when I saw John T, one of the NU lawyers here, advocate, I became very happy because I knew they gave me a lifeline. Because if it wasn't that NPO, I wouldn't stand in this platform today and speak freely because I did not know my rights as a human being. I wouldn't have been evicted where I was staying. You see, that's why I said the music will play. Thank you so much.
My name is Vishwas Sadka. I'm an academic and an activist in the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. Prof. Nico, there is an act to affirm the right to food in our constitution. It's called the People's Food Sovereignty Act, number 1 of 2024. And there's also a policy backing that up. Feed ourselves through food sovereignty. This was taken to our parliament on Wednesday, on World Food Day. We invited the Minister of Agriculture, of Land and Environment, and they ignored us, and they never came to receive these documents. These are ideas that come from the most vulnerable in our society, the landless. It comes from small-scale fishers, over 70,000 of them. It comes from informal traders, thousands of them. It comes from social justice organizations and climate justice organizations. It rejects food security because it's a tainted framework. We will never realize the right to food if food is a commodity. So there's some very fresh thinking here that, ladies and gentlemen, you need to grapple with. We will not understand the systemic challenges if we stay stuck in a food security framework. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm appealing to you to think about food sovereignty as the basis to realize this very precious right. But my challenge is to Mr. Kotza. Mr. Kotza, my grandmother was a garden farmer, and she went and sold her produce in white communities. She was ravaged by dogs and so on. And she couldn't expand her production because of apartheid. Now, there's two things I want to raise with you very quickly. The one is I'm not convinced about your tree-hugging approach. South African farming is responsible for massive biodiversity loss. It uses some of the worst chemicals in the world, including glyphosate. You're not informing and empowering our communities through the precautionary principle on this issue. We also have some of the most exploitative practices in agriculture. But at the same time, I do think you're not the enemy. And so in this act, we are calling for subsidies to be given to commercial farmers, and subsidies that are conditional, so that they can make the transition to agroecology, they can end the war with nature, and dialogue with us as society to transition towards land justice. So I want to hand this over to you, and I'd like to get your response.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Skhulile Ngobo. I'm a lecturer at the UJ Law Faculty. So my question is addressed to the judge as well as Ms. Miller. So looking at that judgment, the equal education judgment, I basically want to find out, especially from the judge, I can't fault the judgment. I feel as though that was basically the best approach to go about it, but mine is more to speak about the conduct of the DBE and how they basically responded prior to the judgment itself, and the missed opportunity in terms of being able to declare the NSNP as an essential service. I feel as though, in as much as the disaster regulations at the time had not done that, it was up to the DBE in their capacity to ensure that that particular service is also then declared as an as an essential service. So I wanted to get the judge's remarks so far as the national, the NSNP rather, being declared an essential service, so as to ensure that the most vulnerable of our society were not left without this essential meal that they would have obviously needed within that time. So was this not a missed opportunity on their part? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Pumza Zotwana, founder of Kulisa Food and Nutrition Security Initiative in Zwelithemba, Worcester, an initiative which was inspired by the University of Stellenbosch back in 2011 when I was a field worker on a baseline study on malnutrition and stunting within Zwelithemba, which was headed by Professor Miller Macmillan. Anyway, as a member of the team while we were conducting the study or working as a field worker, I had picked up while we were doing the door-to-door visits in the household that within the medical questions, there was a number of people within the community who had passed on because of TB within the area. So it haunted me, and then I decided to engage with the Department of Health or clinic to find out why are people dying of TB when it's a curable disease. Then came the birth of the Kulisa Food and Nutrition Initiative, which was then there to support the TB patients, especially those who had a history of defaulting because they lacked food. So we started food gardens for the TB patients. So when it comes to Department of Health, we also picked up that you would often think that people who are food insecure are people who don't have access to food. But when you link food and health or food nutrition, there's a lack of food education where even people who have access to food or money to buy food are preparing food their own way. They don't know which food has the nutrients. Number two, okay, the other question is, for the school's nutrition program, we have also food gardens in the ECDs. And we realized that now we have over 100 food gardens within our community, ECDs, all the centers, and being trained. But how do we then make sure that some of the patients that we train during and we also have household gardens from previous or former patients. Now we want to get into the space of sustainability, and part of that requires the small scale farm workers, beneficiaries, to have access to markets. And we realized that through the Schools and Nutrition program, it could be a catalyst in terms of the procurement, where we could be able to say in Zwelithemba we've got 100 farmers in their backyards and in schools gardens that could actually supply the school's nutrition program with food. So is there a plan where we could work together in ensuring that we move beyond hunger or food security, but we go into sustainability and food value chain within our communities?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Arm, hand. If I give you the hand, take the hand or the fingers, please, not the arm. Please, guys, we need to manage time, please. There's a song in my language. Dagunika isandla, dagunika ingalo, dagunika mabele, into oyaziyo awuyazi. So please, let's work together on time. I know these are deep issues. I know this is an opportunity to engage. Unfortunately, we have to honor time precisely because of schedules. There are many people here who have to take flights, some in the next hour, some strictly at certain times, and you all know Cape Town traffic. I don't need to tell you about it. Can we get, please, a response from Judge Potterill and Ms. Muller, because there are specific questions that were posed to you on the online platform. And to the extent that we can truncate our responses, I'd be very appreciative. And then on the stage, literally, we will move from Mr. Boshoff all the way to Mr. Coleman at the end. And again, you respond to what was put to you and you put the microphone to the next person's hand, please. Thank you so much. Judge?
Thank you very much. As I understand the question was, wasn't there a missed opportunity to declare this program an essential service? Perhaps, but they didn't come in terms of the National State of Disaster Act. So it wasn't necessary to declare it. And the only relevance of that would be if we ever have another, please not, national state of disaster, then there would have been a precedent pertaining to that. But because there is now a High Court judgment, they wouldn't have to go back to the National State of Disaster Act and try and declare it an essential service, they could rely on this judgment for it to be rolled out if ever it should be a problem again. I hope that answers the question.
Very much, Judge. Appreciate that. Ms. Miller?
Thank you. In response to that, it was a national state of disaster, which was not expected at all from the Department of Basic Education side, that the schools were closed as of immediate effect, and we didn't know the time frame. So when the court judgment came, schools were closed. So it was also a new area that we had to address. So what we've done is we've changed our conditional grant framework. Because the one thing that must be said clearly is the National School Nutrition Program is a school-based program. So now, with the national state disaster, the children or the learners were not at school, they were at home. So what do we do? So we had to change the way we serve meals or the way we had done in the past, where we had cooked meals served at school. So we have changed our conditional grant framework where we included food parcels that could be collected either weekly or each province had their own plan, but food parcels are now part of our conditional grant framework. So yes, it was an opportunity as maybe missed, but it was also a learning curve. And we have made adjustments to address if there's ever a national disaster again. Then I want to respond as well to the Greek school gardens, the Greek schools and the gardens there. This is quite a difficult one because when we look at the agricultural school, we want the gardens to be used for learning purposes. Although there can be lots of grounds, there's also a question then of resources because, for instance, water is costly in the end and a fruit garden takes a lot of will take water and maybe other resources from the school and who pays for it. And then another factor that we always have to concern or address or look at is the safety of learners. If we allow community members anytime at the school ground, because a huge garden will, on an agricultural school, will require some people that work there. So there's many things to consider, and when we look at maybe established community gardens, it's something that we will do per individual school. We cannot just make a general policy. Then the other one about access to markets, we would love that as the nutrition program, but the main challenge according to that is we need a hub. As a school-based program, we cannot go to the different smallholder farmers and say, can you provide it and you provide that. There should be a general hub. And then if you look at our food baskets to say, but we can access this, because the main thing for the National School Nutrition Program is to be sustainable. We can't now select this week, but next week there's not produce. So it's very important that there's the discussions around that, but that there's a center point where we can collect.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that response. A question on the inclusion of persons with disabilities and the deaf community. Mr. Boshoff.
Address the gentleman. You know, when I went for my interview last year in Parliament, the very first question that was put to me was, what have you done for people living with disabilities? And the reason why this question was asked is because not enough is being done for people living with disabilities. And to respond to your question, it's a very difficult question to respond to today. But I do think advocacy sessions, advocacy workshops are not enough anymore. We should stop only focusing on that. We need to involve people living with disabilities in decision-making, strategic decision-making. They should be involved in the process, but also they should be recipients of the outcomes of these strategic decisions. So that's my input for now.
Thanks. I think the question was around the accountability and best practices. What I can say is this, from my experience, the best way for people to, for you to ensure that there is accountability on any issue that you are dealing with, first of all, you need to ensure there is participation, a participatory approach. If you are dealing with the government authorities or whoever has that power, if they are not involved from the beginning, most likely they will not respect whatever you do. So you have to get them involved in the actual planning when you are designing your accountability framework. They should be part of it, and they should see the value of them being part of that. With that, there is more likelihood that you will get cooperation, and then you'll be able to move together to see what has come out of what you have planned. Without that, there is a tendency for intransigence with power. It's simply that they would show you that, look, I will not do what you are saying, or doesn't matter what you think. So key is to ensure that they are involved, they are part of the process, and you have also clarity in terms of that accountability framework with clear indicators of what you are going to eventually request them to account for. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Ms. Hunter, to your left.
Thanks. The issue of people who are not necessarily being food insecure, still eating wrongly and becoming malnourished is a very important issue. It was raised by the young woman who asked the last question, but also someone previously said, what is government doing to educate people on the high intake of sugar, and I want to add salt to that. In short, if you Google R337, if you're not good at remembering numbers, the name of the bill is the front of pack labeling bill. You will then see that there is a piece of legislation that the Department of Health is trying to get through into an act, and this is to change the present setup where the front of packs, whether it's a can of cool drink, whether it's a box of cereal, has got the attractive pictures that communicate the wrong thing to you just by how it looks, to change that, and to put the actual content of the food bold and in front of that packet. If you just take a can of Lipton iced tea, the word tea will make you think you may be drinking something good, and then on top of that, that can has got apples on and pineapples at the back of the writing. There's no natural fruit in Lipton, and it's one of the drinks on the market with the highest sugar content in it. Then there's a group of young people, and the last lady who asked questions is fairly young. I want to say this to the young people in the room. Go and Google the group, the movement, Fix My Food, and join them. It's a group of young people all over South Africa who are activists for that regulation, and they're saying to us as government, hurry up, pass that regulation, we will support you, because we are going to get opposition from the industry. They are not going to like the fact that we say you can no longer say almost 100% fruit when there's nearly no fruit in the content of a drink. Yeah, let me leave it at that, Chairperson.
Prof. Olivier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to very briefly just add that last part, which I stopped the music for, and before the music restarts. It's basically about what is currently happening in government. And I must say I'm very positively impressed. And that's why I said when I try to state the facts, the stark reality, the bad statistics, we have to move forward. But government has taken it really seriously. This review that was done in 2023 about our failure as a country. And the minister in the presidency, as well as the deputy minister, the two DGGs for DPME, who are present today and were also present yesterday. The one of them spoke yesterday, as well as the Deputy Director General for Health. There might be other officials. I would really like to say I salute these officials for their steadfastness and their commitment to change the scenario. So they've started with the 2024 with a program, the rollout of the inclusive multi-sector, multi-stakeholder National Food Systems Dialogue. And this is supported by the FAO as well as the UN Food Systems Coordination Hub, to draft a new implementation plan, implementable plan for the period 2025 to 2030. They've already established, and the group consists at this point in time, one of the groups is the Food Systems Group, and it consists of about 140 plus people from the private sector, civil society, academia, organized agriculture, name it, and government. And the four themes that they're working on is the first one, Pathway 1, is enhance sustainable local production for local consumption of safe, nutritious, and indigenous food. Pathway 2, to promote social, economic, and environmental resilience. On 3, facilitate inclusive, sustainable, and competitive value chains. And finally, to promote the integrated food system policies, legislation, planning, and very important, governance. And finally, as far as accountability is concerned, I would just like to add that there are a group of us in theme number, pathway number 4, who are absolutely adamant that the indicators should be drafted in such a manner that we indicate who will be the actual duty bearers, as well as what will be the accountability measures and the consequence management to be included in the policies and eventually in the APPs and the strat plans of the departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. Mr. Coleman, can I give you 2 minutes?
Sure, thanks. You know, I'm not an expert on food systems, but from the work that I've done over the years, I think the issue that Vish raises is critical, that the issues in the food system are systemic. And again, as I said in my input, you can't tinker around the edges. You know, a number of people have spoken about community farming projects. My son has started an organic farming project in Cape Town, and he's working with people in Philippi, which is like the food basket of Cape Town. They've got no access to the market. You know, someone raised the question of the cost of capital. Interest rates are prohibitive. The retailers completely dominate, you know, access to the markets and so on and so forth. So I think I would appeal that the center looks very closely at what the food sovereignty group that Vish was talking about is proposing. But I think also we've got to start looking at some of the international examples of successful distribution, particularly of essential foods in Latin America, in Asia, intervention by the public sector in providing essential foods directly to the community. Obviously, there are challenges in South Africa, but we need to look at how we overcome that. Another issue that was raised by Phineas about the question of the cost of transport, the lack of income, directly relates to the point that I was raising, is you need a strategy to raise household income, which needs to be a combination of basic income together with a decent minimum wage, which will raise the ability of households to become food secure and to be able to buy food. The one example, I forget who raised it, of a delivery person who came to the house looking completely drawn and you know, lacking nutrition. He's working full-time. He doesn't have enough money to buy food. What does that tell you about this particular challenge? So, yeah, those are a couple of comments from my side.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Neil. Mr. Kotze, finish up, please.
So, Dr. Satkar, thank you so much for not calling me an enemy, because the last enemy I had was African swine fever. It wasn't anything else. I want to use an example. Thank you for the book. The book is a gift. Otherwise, the minister is going to ask me, why did you accept it on my behalf? So, Professor, I accept it as a gift. Thank you so much. South Africa is the most food secure country in Africa. So apartheid then worked? No. But we should not go there. Because then we make something an enemy. It's not about that. It's about people not having food. I understand what you say about, and I am a Triaga. I understand what you say. We said we want to be the Green Party in South Africa, and I can tell you why. because we understand how to farm sustainably. You are right in what you said about the things that was used. Industrialization came through fertilizer because we went from 2 tons to 16 tons just to discover, but we actually also, to a certain extent, in default. Is there anybody here with an electric car? Come on.
There's one right there.
Well done. Come on. Come on. That's the problems that we deal with. So it's so complex. And what you just, for me here, emphasize is the complexity that we need to deal with. And I accept the challenge. The difficulty is, it's so difficult to convert. Can you all today sell your cars? And actually, in fact, what are we going to do with the cars that we're going to sell? You're going to put them into a hole in my farm and then messed up my underground water. What are we going to do with it? Do you have the money to convert to electric cars? Come on, be honest. Do you have the money to do it? I don't have it now. So it is so complex and so difficult. What I do plea for is sometimes the emotion of what we deal with overshadows the problem what we need to address. And you know where we need to go to, because that's where I see that we are, I want to call you a friend. You're looking for an outcome. And that's what we opt for. So I don't deny as a farmer, standing here, that we use all the practices on the farm that are sound and secure. I don't deny that. I would argue about the subsidies, because I think to a certain extent, we're going to give them subsidies and we're going to put subsidies in, but it might cause a different problem. The farmers in Europe can't farm without subsidies anymore. 75% of their total income is subsidized. I don't see that model as working. Somebody mentioned something and I need to say it. As a farmer, I need to make a profit. Do you know why? Because I need to buy the next tractor. I need to buy the next bag of seed. The profit is not just for me to be a greater farmer. So what I plea for, and that's my end, is we live in such a complex world. My world is marred with complexity of risks. If we're going to go and we put a lot of emotion to what we have, we stir the wrong behavior amongst people. And for too long in South Africa, we've stirred this emotion. You know what I sense? And that's what's making me, I would say, I'm so excited about agriculture. It feels for the first time there's a focus on what the outcome should look like. We're not going back into the past. We rectify what needs to be rectified. I don't see an apartheid law. I see a law not modernized enough to enable farmers to achieve an outcome. And that we need to change. So thank you for the friendship. I extend my hand with friendship, and I say this is a gift. And what I experienced today, Professor Tuli, is a conversation. And we should have more conversations. I would like to understand a man with a suit being homeless, because it touched my heart. And my take is, and I'm asking the question again, what are you going to do if you leave here today? We all have a part to play. It's not just our President Ramaphosa, it's us. It's the way I work at home, how I waste at home, how I eat at home. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much to our panelists. If I may please ask Professor Madonsela to come up on stage to hand all of our panelists their gifts, at least in hand, not at all excluding our panelists who joined in online from the Department of Education, Ms. Miller, and from the Judiciary, Judge Potterall. Your gift certainly will come, and I'm saying this to state it on record so that the Center for Social Justice ensures that these happen. If Professor Madonsela can come up on stage, please, so she can present to our panelists. The photography can take place at the same time. There we go, Prof. Whilst we are on that, I must confirm that it was my mistake that we are now running 15 minutes behind schedule. I take the blame for that. I am sorry for that. We will recover time. We'll look to recover time. Those of you who are going to go down for lunch, please go down for lunch. At 1:15, we will start. I'm the moderator for the next session as well, and I'm going to try and find ways in which we don't repeat some of the mistakes that we made here. And that mistake is having a second round of questions.